Assalamu my dudes, and welcome back to PLB Green. Today, I'm taking you on a journey. 3 months ago, a good friend of mine, Danny, from Board Game Sanctuary, gave me the idea to build a mini, living, breathing Hobbiton from Lord of the Rings. First step was to build the base structure of the system. I used plywood and I glued it together with liquid nails, sanded it back at the joins. We got our base structure, mate. Next, I wanted to waterproof the timber. I used core flute and I cut each panel to size and glued them in with silicone. As each panel was placed in, I siliconed the seal between each of them. This was just to ensure that the water stayed within the system and didn't leak into the timber itself. It was now time to build up the base structure of Hobbiton. I used model foam and using layers I siliconed each of them down, making sure to leave specific spaces for a river that was going to run down the middle of the system. I bought a copy of the Middle-earth strategy battle game, Hobbit Hole. It comes with a little 3D printout of a double-sided Hobbit hole and a couple of chimneys and 2 little cute windows. Now, as I have a bit of experience with Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons, I do have some painting skills, so I pulled out my citadels and I painted up the 3D prints. And I was pretty pleased with the results. I liked the little blue door and matching windows. It's pretty cool. Because the system involves water, I had to spray the paint down with a sealer. This is an outdoor sealer, matte finish. Now that I knew the specific dimensions of the Hobbit hole, I could really define the base structure of the model. This part was really fun. I got to use my wet dry vac and actually go ham and just destroy the top surface of all of the model foam. The goal was to make the surface of the structure look more of a landscape. I think I succeeded. The next step was to cover the landscape with a coat of 100% black silicone and put down some peat moss. This part was really fun and a large proportion of why I do PLB Green. Getting your hands messy and just exploring creativity. Moving on to the river system, I mixed some silicone with sand and decided to glue down the base of the river just so it didn't get washed down when the pump system was turned on. It is time. This is my first water test for this project. Pouring it in, I was a little bit nervous, but also hopeful. I put the pump in and plugged it in and just decided to check out if the river system was going to work. Success! It's dusty musty, but it works. because the whole system is based off one little 3D printout, I decided to glue in the Hobbit hole at this point just so I could keep track of the perspective. I knew I wanted to hide the pump system on the left and also that large area of white core flute. So I built up a wall of black lava rock, and then I put some 90-degree turns into the pump pipe system. Once I was satisfied with the flow of the system, I glued the pipe into the back and side wall with superglue just to make sure that it was out of the way and tucked in nicely. At this point, I was starting to get excited, and I knew it was soon time for planting. As Hobbiton is made up mostly of a grass landscape, I decided to plant this setup with moss, which represents grass on a small scale. Thanks Detchen for the super sharp scissors. I'm using moss cloth here, which is 100% cotton and draws up water to help hydrate the moss. I'm using various species of moss here. It's a combination of terrestrial moss and fern moss, but I think using a variety of species helps to build the landscape and give it a bit more texture. You can start to gain a bit of a perspective of the overall build here. The moss really adds a layer of realism to the complete build. I'm just showing you on the left here an example of how I laid down the moss cloth and then patched together the various species of moss to create that grass scape. Began the process of fine detailing here, putting down various patches of sand and debris, putting down rocks in the river system and the pond system on the left, and just starting to detail the entire system with small elements which all add up to making it look more realistic. Here I took a leaf and cut it up into small little slithers, just trying to get a leaf effect on the front of the Hobbiton house. Small stones and little parts of timber helped to create the effect of a miniature system. It was now time to start working on the hillock at the back of Hobbiton. I put down a drainage layer because I knew I wanted to plant some small tiger bark ficus. And if you don't put down a drainage layer, the roots will eventually get root rot. I wanted to keep them clear of the water, so I put down a screen above the drainage layer and started to lay down some bonsai soil, blocking off areas where I thought the soil might spill over was beneficial, and that way I could keep the soil retained to a certain area. The tiger bark ficus selection I had are all cuttings from a different project of mine. I've had them rooted for about 6 months and they're definitely ready to be replanted. I worked my way across the hillock, putting the ficus in a random pattern, not showing any sort of symmetry or anything like that, and just trying to get a bit of a forest vibe. I then meticulously worked my way across the forest, filling in all the gaps and the air pockets around the roots of the ficus with a test tube full of soil. After that, I put in the chimneys on the left and the right and decided placement for the various products that came with the Hobbit hole. Now it was time to grass the hillock above the Hobbit hole. I placed down small patches of the moss cloth on areas that I knew moisture wouldn't get to naturally through the soil. After that, I puzzled in parts of different species of moss, including fern moss and various other terrestrial mosses. I trimmed back the moss at the top of the Hobbit hole just to make sure consistency was key, and fiddled around with the moss pretty much for hours on end. My favourite part of this whole process was to add some of the final details to the project. A little fence and a tiny little bridge for the hobbits to cross over. Yeah, pretty good. Some of the last steps in this project were to cover up the white corflute edges with tufts of moss, and lastly to put in a layer of charcoal at the front of the build that contained a little colony of springtails that would very successfully eat up any mold or fungi that grew within the moss. Here it is, the final build. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If I was going to make any changes, it would be to the left wall. I'm thinking about piling moss up across that moss cloth on the left. But apart from that, I'm really pleased with this build. I like the way that the tigerbark ficus create a shadow over the build. The finer details and the running river really make this feel like a miniature Hobbiton. I'd like to thank Danny from Board Game Sanctuary and my students in 5B for helping me out with this project. It's been a long journey, but I've enjoyed every single minute of it. Thanks guys, enjoy the remaining footage of this miniature Hobbiton. Thanks for watching, see you next time on PLB Green.